All right, diving in. Today we're going to be looking at a chapter from an environmental science textbook.
Ooh, fun.
Yeah, and it's all about ecosystems,
Okay.
how they work,
Mm.
and honestly, how we kind of mess them up.
Yeah, we don't always realize how much of an impact we have.
Right. So we're going to talk about all sorts of things from food webs to the ozone layer to even like trash and how we deal with it.
Really hitting all the big stuff.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty deep.
Looking forward to it.
So first off, what even is an ecosystem? I know we hear that word all the time,
Yeah, it gets thrown around a lot.
but what is it really? The book defines it as a community
Okay.
of living things, all interacting with each other
Right.
and the environment.
It's like a city, but with plants and animals instead of people.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
And just like a city needs, roads and electricity and stuff.
Infrastructure.
Yeah, ecosystems need their own kind of
The
infrastructure.
non-living stuff.
Right, the book calls it abiotic components. Oh yeah, like sunlight and water, the temperature,
All that.
Yeah.
And they all play a part in, making the ecosystem what it is.
determining who can survive there.
Exactly. And there's so many different types of ecosystems.
Oh yeah, for sure.
The book gives examples like forests,
Of course.
ponds, even a fish tank.
Oh, that's cool. Like a little mini ecosystem.
Yeah, it's kind of wild how even something like that can reflect the bigger picture.
Right, because it's all about the relationships between the living and non-living stuff.
Now, what I found interesting was the difference between natural ecosystems
Mm-hmm.
and human-made ones.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Like a forest that's evolved over centuries, you know?
It's got its own rhythm going on,
Yeah, but then you have something like a garden.
which is still an ecosystem.
Totally.
Yeah.
But it needs us to maintain it.
Yeah, we have to step in and manage it.
And within any ecosystem, you've got these different roles.
The players in the game.
Exactly. The producers, the consumers.
And the decomposers. Can't forget them. Right. Producers are like the foundation, the plants.
Yeah, they're the ones who make the food.
They use the sun's energy. It's pretty amazing.
Photosynthesis. It's like the ultimate superpower.
I know, right? And then you've got the consumers, the herbivores, eating the plants.
And then the carnivores eating the herbivores.
It's a whole chain reaction.
Yeah, a food chain. And they can get pretty complex.
That's where the food webs come in, right?
Yeah, it's not just a straight line. It's more like a tangled web.
Which makes sense. Like a wolf might eat a deer,
Mm,
but it could also eat a rabbit or something.
yeah, and the rabbit might eat grass and berries,
So it all gets pretty interconnected.
which is why it's so important to understand these relationships.
Totally. And speaking of food chains and webs,
Mm-hmm.
we got to talk about trophic levels.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
It's basically like where an organism sits in the food chain.
Like the producers are at the bottom,
Right. Then the herbivores who eat them, then the carnivores who eat those.
and so on up the chain.
And here's the crazy part. Only about 10% of the energy from one level gets transferred to the next.
Whoa, that's a pretty big loss.
Yeah, so if a plant has 100 units of energy,
Mm-hmm.
the herbivore that eats it only gets 10.
Wow, so eating lower on the food chain is actually way more efficient.
Totally. Like if you eat a plant, you're getting more of that original energy.
Makes you think about those plant-based diets differently, huh?
It does. It's like connecting the science to our everyday choices.
All connected.
Which brings up the less fun topic, how we humans can really mess things up.
Yeah, we can have some unintended consequences.
Like with biomagnification,
Oh, that's a tricky one.
it's basically how pollutants can build up as you go up the food chain.
The book uses pesticides as an example.
Right, so you've got these chemicals to protect crops,
Mm-hmm.
but they can end up in the soil, the water,
And then the plants absorb them.
and then the animals eat the plants and so on.
And the problem is a lot of these pollutants, they don't break down easily.
Right, so they just keep accumulating.
So by the time you get to a top predator, like a hawk,
Or even us.
they've got a way higher concentration of these chemicals.
It's kind of scary to think about,
It is. It shows how our actions can have these ripple effects.
and we don't always see them right away.
Exactly.
Speaking of actions with big consequences,
Mm-hmm.
the ozone layer, that's a big one.
Oh, yeah. Our planet's sunscreen.
It's up there protecting us from all that harmful radiation.
And it's formed through this amazing process with oxygen and UV radiation.
It's wild how it all works.
But then we come along with our CFCs and stuff.
Oh, yeah, those were in refrigerators and aerosols, right?
Yeah, and when they get up into the atmosphere,
They mess with the ozone.
big time, they break it down faster than it can be replaced.
And that's how you get the ozone hole.
Yeah.
Not a good thing.
So are we doomed? Is there anything we can do about it?
Actually, yeah. The book talks about the Montreal Protocol.
Okay.
It was this international agreement back in '87,
Mm.
and it led to a huge decrease in CFC production.
So we're on the mend. It's looking good. The ozone layer is healing, slowly but surely.
Ah, gives me hope.
Me too. It shows that we can solve these problems when we work together.
Now, from the ozone layer, the book dives into another human-made problem:
Oh, no, what now?
waste management.
Ah, yeah, all our trash.
We produce a lot of it.
Especially with all the disposable stuff we use.
Right. And not all waste is created equal.
Some of it breaks down naturally,
Yeah, the biodegradable stuff, like food scraps.
but then you have the non-biodegradable stuff.
like plastic bottles, that sticks around for a long, long time.
Yeah, and that's where things get tricky.
Because what do we do with all that trash?
That's the million-dollar question.
A lot of it ends up in landfills.
Which have their own set of problems.
Yeah, like they can leak harmful chemical.
And produce methane gas, which is bad for the climate.
It's clear that just burying our trash isn't a good long-term solution.
We need to find better ways to deal with it.
So what are some alternatives?
Well, the book talks about recycling.
Okay, makes sense.
Repurposing materials like paper, glass, plastic.
And composting.
Nature's way of recycling.
Right. Turning food scraps into something useful.
It's all about moving towards a more circular economy.
Where we're not just using and tossing things away.
Yeah, thinking about the whole life cycle of a product.
And to illustrate this, the book brings up a really interesting example.
Oh, what's that?
Disposable cups in trains.
Huh, interesting.
Remember how they used to have those reusable plastic cups?
Oh, yeah, you had to return them.
Yeah, and then they switched to disposable ones.
Which seemed like a good idea at the time.
More hygienic, more convenient. It created a huge waste problem.
Oh, yeah, all those cups adding up.
It's crazy how something so small can have such a big impact.
It really shows how we need to think more critically about our choices.
About the consequences of our actions.
It can feel overwhelming.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in.
But it's also empowering, knowing that we can make a difference.
We'll be back in just a moment to talk more about that.
Looking forward to it.
Stay tuned. All right, back to the deep dive. We've been talking about how ecosystems work.
All those connections?
Yeah, but now it's time to look at how we're messing them up.
Getting down to the nitty-gritty.
Exactly, and the book actually has this cool activity. It's like a mini experiment you could do at home.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
You basically bury a bunch of different stuff in the ground.
Like what kind of stuff?
Food scraps, paper, plastic bottles, even old clothes.
And then what? You just leave it?
Yeah, you see what happens over time, how it decomposes or doesn't.
Kind of like a time capsule of trash.
Yeah, and it really shows the difference between biodegradable and non-biodegradable materials.
So like the food scraps break down, right?
Yeah, the decomposers go to work on those.
Turning them back into nutrients for the soil.
Exactly, but the plastic bottles, not so much.
They probably just sit there.
Yeah, pretty much. They can take hundreds or even thousands of years to break down.
Yikes. So where does all that stuff go?
Most of it ends up in landfills.
Those massive trash heaps.
Yeah, out of sight, out of mind.
But they're not really a solution, are they?
No, they cause their own problems.
Like what?
They can leak harmful chemicals into the ground and water,
Oh, right.
and they release methane gas, which is bad for the climate.
So we need a better plan.
We do. So what are some of the alternatives?
Well, recycling is a big one.
Yeah, I try to recycle as much as I can.
It's about reusing materials instead of just throwing them away.
And then there's composting.
Turning food waste into something useful.
It's like nature's recycling system.
Right. And it all ties into this idea of a circular economy.
Where we're not just consuming and discarding.
It's about closing the loop.
And the book has this really cool example.
Tell me more.
Remember when tea on trains used to be served in those reusable plastic cups?
Oh, yeah, you had to give them back.
And then they switched to disposable cups?
Seems more hygienic.
Right. More convenient, too.
But
it created a massive amount of waste.
all those cups piling up.
It's crazy how a small change can have such a big impact.
It really makes you think about your choices.
And how they ripple outward.
It's not just about us. It's about the whole planet.
And speaking of choices, the book also talks about electronic waste.
E-waste. That's a tough one.
Yeah, it's not something we always think about.
Where do our old phones and computers go?
Right. It's easy to just forget about them.
But they contain all sorts of toxic materials.
And if they're not disposed of properly,
it can be really harmful to the environment.
It's another example of how our actions have consequences.
Even when we don't see them right away.
This deep dive has really highlighted how everything is connected.
Yeah, we're all part of this web of life.
And our choices matter.
More than we sometimes realize.
We'll be back in just a bit to talk more about what we can do to make a difference.
Sounds good. Looking forward to it.
Stay tuned.
All right, we're back for the final part of our deep dive. We've talked about ecosystems, how they work, and all the ways we humans can mess them up.
Yeah, it's It's been pretty heavy.
But it's not all doom and gloom, right? There's got to be hope. Oh, definitely. Understanding the problems is just the first step.
So now we got to focus on solution.
Exactly. What can we do to make things better?
I'm all ears. Where do we even start?
Well, the book really stresses the importance of awareness.
Like knowing how our actions affect the environment.
Yeah. And it poses some really interesting questions to get us thinking.
Oh, like what?
One that stood out to me was, if all the waste we generate is biodegradable, will this have no impact on the environment?
Hmm. That's a good one. It makes you think.
Right. It challenges the idea that biodegradable waste is harmless.
Because even if it breaks down eventually,
It can still cause problems in the meantime.
like if you just leave a pile of food scraps lying around.
Exactly. It'll attract pests, create bad smells, could even contaminate water sources.
So it's not just about what kind of waste we produce.
It's about how we manage it.
Okay, that makes sense.
Another question the book asks is, why is damage to the ozone layer a cause for concern?
We talked about that earlier, but it's worth repeating.
It's super important. The ozone layer protects us from all that harmful UV radiation.
Which can cause all sorts of health problems.
Skin cancer, cataracts, even weakened immune systems.
Not to mention the harm it can do to plants and animals.
It's a big deal.
So what can we do about it?
Well, the good news is we've already seen some success with the Montreal Protocol.
Right, that international agreement to phase out ozone-depleting substances.
It proves that we can solve these global problems when we work together.
That's encouraging.
And the last question the book poses is, what steps are being taken to limit damage to the environment?
That's like a call to action.
Yeah. It wants us to look at the solutions that are already out there.
Because there are people working on this, right?
Absolutely. There are so many innovative ideas and initiatives.
From biodegradable plastics to better waste management systems.
People are getting creative.
So what can we, the everyday folks, do to help?
It starts with being aware, knowing how our choices impact the environment.
Like choosing reusable products over disposable ones.
Supporting recycling and composting programs.
And speaking up, advocating for policies that protect the planet.
We all have a role to play.
It can feel overwhelming at times.
It can, but it's also empowering.
Knowing that our actions, no matter how small, can make a difference.
Yeah. It all adds up.
Well, this deep dive has definitely given me a lot to think about.
Me too. It's been a real learning experience.
We've covered a lot of ground, from food webs to waste management.
And everything in between.
It's all connected and we're all part of it.
It's a big, complex, beautiful world out there.
And it's up to us to protect it.
Absolutely. We have to be good stewards of this planet.
So let's keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep taking action.
Because together, we can make a difference.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you learned something new.
And we hope you'll continue exploring this topic.
Until next time, keep diving deep.